Hello, welcome back to I Got Board Game.
I got board game.
I Got Board Game. I'm Ben,
John.
and today we are here to do a review of a game for you that we have done some other videos on, but now we're finally at the point where we can do this review where we feel like we played it enough to give you our thoughts on it. And that game is
Enter the Gungeon. The Bullet King.
Bullet King.
Dun, dun, dun.
Nice.
By the way, this is a great game. You should play it. But anyway, this is separate.
We're not sponsored. So
Or
the game
Bullets.
Bullets.
Bullet.
Bullets.
Bullet. This is the Kickstarter page.
Because that's what you're showing.
Yep.
So
this is the most horizontal.
This is Bullet Heart, the first in the series. We'll probably just be referring to it as Bullet, just so it's simpler, but it is technically called, Bullet Heart. And we'll
Fox Girl Bullet Heart.
And we'll get into why there's that naming difference a little later too. But for now, we'll just say this is a game by Level 99 Games, which was on Kickstarter originally. Was it like 2 years ago?
Year and a half, 2 years, yeah, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. And so it came out during pandemic. That's when I received my copy, I believe, and I got to play a lot of it first on my own, the solo mode, just to try and learn how it plays, and then eventually played it with my cousin. And I think my cousin, actually quite a few other friends, like introducing this to them, and then eventually finally John.
Finally.
And then we even before we felt ready to give this review, I wanted us to also try the co-op mode. So that's also what I got to do with John kind of last time we played it. And so that's why we are ready to give you our thoughts on this game. It is a shoot 'em up puzzle, a real-time shoot 'em up puzzle game. So for those of you who don't know, the shoot 'em up aspect kind of goes into the theme of the game, where it's a board game that's trying to capture the feel of shoot 'em up video games, or games you might think of some as like top-down shooters or bullet hell games. Those are kind of other names that that kind of game has, or even subgenres in it, where you might be like a ship at the bottom shooting upward to kill whatever is flying at you, and other things are shooting bullets at you too, and you're dodging. So like really early on versions would be like Space Invaders and Galaga and those kind of games, where then that genre, though it's not big in video games for a long time now, there have been a lot of anime versions of those, or a lot of versions of those come out of Japan over the years. And so it's kind of drawing from that history, that genre of video game, putting it into a puzzle kind of board game form that plays in real time, so not turn-based. And so that's just to give you a brief idea. When we talk about this, we might use the word shmup a lot.
Schmuck.
Shmup, John. So like SHMUP, that's just abbreviation for shoot 'em up. Shoot 'em up. So that's just to clarify if we keep saying the word shmup throughout this review.
And not schmuck.
Yeah, not schmuck or smut or other bad stuff like that. And so to get into our review, we'll do a brief overview. We'll give you a rough idea of how the game plays or how it'll feel, and then we'll move on to our thoughts on it. And so to give you a brief idea of how the game plays, we are going to share one of my own photos of the game, since I couldn't find that many. So this is one player's setup. And so I'm going to use this to explain and then show you what it will look like with the other players setup. But basically, when you set up the game, every player will choose a character, which will come with this left board, which has their special ability and their hit points at the bottom. So they're special ability or their unique ability is what it's called, a UA, and then their hit points, and it'll come with the right side board, which has their abilities, which are generally unique to that character, but then, certain ones will be similar among all the characters. And it also includes their action point gauge here, this 0 through 7. And then every player will get a central board, which has their current at the top, this indicator up here, and this is called their grid. Is that what it was?
Sight.
Thank you. Their sight. There are just some key terms in this game that are used in abilities, so that's why we're trying to use the right terms. But yes, there's the current, which is the area above the central board, and then your sight, which is your grid, where all these tokens, which are the bullets that are flying at you, will end up during the game. And so the general idea is every player will have their own bag, this black bag, in which they're going to fill with a certain number of these bullets randomly drawn from a big white bag of all these bullets, which is considered the center. So that's kind of like the bank of all the bullets. And so you're going to start with a certain number randomly put into your bag, your own bag at the beginning of the game. And then when the round starts, the whole point is you need to get through all of those bullets. Basically, you have to survive all of those bullets flying at you. And the way that's going to happen is you're going to have to draw one bullet at a time from the bag. And depending on which color it is, you'll go to that column in your sight of the same color. And then whatever number on it is how many empty spaces you'll move down and place the bullet. So for example, this 1 is placed up here, and then this person later on probably drew this other red 1, but you're counting empty spaces. So it wouldn't land on the same bullet already there. It would go to the next empty spot 1 space down. And so that's basically how you'll count how fast these bullets come at you. The bullets are numbered 1 through 4. And so there's this idea of pushing your luck of, when do I draw a bullet? Do I think it'll hit me? Or if it'll actually fit into my sight? Because if a bullet ever moves down to this bottom line of spots, it immediately moves to the left where your hit points are and hits you. And once you get hit however many life you have, that's how you get eliminated from the game and lose. And so this is all happening in real time, like I mentioned. So there's not any turns. You're not taking turns drawing one bullet at a time, but you're just going at your own pace, drawing bullets from the bag. And there's actually a timer for this game, which is 3 minutes per round. So you actually need to get through all your bullets in 3 minutes. And if you run out of time, the only action you can do is continue to draw bullets from your bag until your bag is empty. So why I mentioned that is because normally during the time that you have, those 3 minutes, aside from drawing bullets from the bag, at any point, you can choose not to draw a bullet and instead take actions, which are based on the right side board here, where all these actions have a number in the top left corner, you can see, which is how many action points it costs to do that action. And so you'll be tracking it for yourself with this black lightning bolt marker along this 0 through 7 line of how many action points you're using. You always start each round with 7, the max amount, but then say you want to do this action, it costs 1, you'll move your marker down to the 6 to indicate you used 1 action point. And so in general though, why you want to do these actions are because these actions let you, for example, move any bullet already in your sight, your central board, in a certain direction. Like you can move it 1 space to the left, right, or down, at least for this character's ability here. And then other abilities in general will be ones that let you draw pattern cards, which is kind of the last big part of the game. Because in selecting a character, you get their left side board, which has their ability and life points, their right side board with their regular abilities. And then you also get their own personal deck of pattern cards, which is kind of blurred here or glary here. But essentially, these pattern cards are also something you can use during the round at any point to help get rid of or remove, or the technical term is clear, bullets from your sight. Basically removing them and send them to your opponent and they'll have them in their bag the next round. And so as you can see in this picture, there is this one pattern that was used already, but essentially there is a simple way to read patterns. And the general idea is you need to have bullets in your sight in a certain configuration, such as on this card, it shows 5 bullets in a row. Once you have that, you can use this pattern card to remove these 3 bullets, or the bullets in these 3 spots in that row of 5. And so once you remove them or clear them, you'll send them to your opponent. And so that's how this is actually a competitive game. You're basically trying to survive the bullets that are coming at you, but then also deflect them, or basically shoot bullets over to your opponents, so that the next round they start with more bullets that will make it harder for them to survive. And so, yeah, you'll play each round during this time limit, and you'll try to get through all your bullets, clearing them however you can using your abilities and action points and your pattern cards. And then each round, you'll basically increase the intensity, basically the amount of bullets each player starts with in their bag the next round. And so it's just going to ramp up until there's only one person that survives the round, and that person is the winner. And so that is a general idea. There will be a couple other mechanics that I didn't mention here that we might bring up later on. But then the one other thing I wanted to do during this brief overview of the rules is to also give you a slight idea of how the co-op mode plays. Because primarily this game is a real-time competitive game trying to eliminate all the other players. But there is a co-op mode which we got to try out. And so let me share that picture now. Because when you choose to play the co-op mode, you're basically going to still choose a character and set up your board like you just saw, but then you'll also choose a boss character. And so a boss character will basically have its own ability and also its own small deck of boss pattern cards and a certain number of shields. And so the shields on the boss are basically their life, and you need to basically get through each of their shields to beat them together. But then beneath each shield number, you can maybe kind of make out here, it basically says how many bullets you have to send over to the boss together in total to remove a certain shield, right? Depending on the player number. So if it's one player, I think on here it says you'll need to send 6 bullets to remove this shield. If it's 2 players, I think it's 12 bullets to remove this shield in total. And so that's the general idea. You're going to be working together, still playing that real-time pattern game. Well, actually, I think there's no timer for the boss mode, right?
Not for boss
when
mode.
we played. And so it is just kind of playing without a timer, trying to survive while send bullets over to the boss together, enough of them so that you can remove all their shields over however many rounds. The other thing to be aware of with the boss mode, and something that makes it hard, aside from whatever ability that might make it hard for you guys, the boss's own patterns are basically going to display 1 pattern card per round, and each player wants to try to fulfill this pattern or this configuration of bullets on their own site, on their own central board. Because if they don't, then they'll basically have to deal with the penalty written on the card. So that's how the boss's pattern works. It's kind of another way that you have to manage your own site, own bullet placement to not get hit even harder by the boss while you're trying to also defeat them. So that is how the co-op mode works. And then, like I mentioned, just to go back to the setup picture, that is one player's setup. And so then this is how it'll look like with 3 players in the middle of a game. They'll each have their character and their board set up with the bullets that have been coming at them throughout the rounds, because the bullets also stay there between rounds. So you're constantly getting more bullets and needing to manage and try to clear them as you can, as efficiently and quickly as you can, because it will build up. And then you can see all the face down bullets are the ones that this player cleared and sent to the person to their left. And then this player, the ones they cleared during the round were sent over here to this player. And then the ones this player cleared were sent to this player into their incoming area. And so those are the ones that these players will start with, in addition to whatever flat amount that they need to start with in the next round and deal with then. And so, yeah, this is how the game looks. And that is the general idea of how the game plays. And so with that, we will get into our thoughts on the game, our pros, starting with John, and also maybe even just addressing like the theme and the artwork first, what you think about that.
Yeah, so despite the amount of time that it might have felt like going through the rules, the game is surprisingly simple and it's very quick to actually play through. So as a pro of this game, honestly, anyone can pick this up. It's very straightforward. It doesn't require that much thinking overall in terms of the actual like gameplay mechanics itself. It's very clean in the way that they do it. So as Ben was mentioning, right, like in a turn, really all the things you're really doing is drawing these bullets out, putting them onto your sights, seeing kind of where they hit, and then making a decision about, do I want to try to use a pattern to clear things out right away, or do I want to use my action points to do some other stuff to get it ready to do that, and then just continue drawing until you basically have no more bullets that you need to pull out of your bag, and then you're done for your round. So it's a very, very simple game. Even on the Kickstarter section here, as it shows, technically it says every game should be about 15 minutes in total, right, on average, especially if you're playing with the timer. If you're not playing with the timer, it kind of pushes a little longer because players will take more time thinking. But if you're playing with the full timer, it is very kind of straightforward, and it encourages that you need to be kind of going fast, let's say, right, or at least keeping up with everybody else. So in that sense, and then talking about the theme, kind of getting into the theme a little bit. This game, I mean, Level 99 is a developer that's done many, many different games. They've created a lot of different ones. We've done some reviews of some of the game. Have we done reviews of Level 99 games?
I don't know. This actually might be.
This might be our first one.
Yeah, but we've mentioned other ones like BattleCon.
I think, yeah, we've mentioned BattleCon and like, Exceed. We've mentioned.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, we did review Exceed.
Yeah, but Exceed is not Level 99, was it?
No, it is.
It is. Okay, so Level 90, so Exceed was one of the games that we've done. So getting back to this, as a developer, Level 99, in my opinion, has been one of the developers that I've always kept an eye out for their games. And anytime Ben mentions a game that's made by them, I'm always like, oh, this is really interesting, because I think one of the things that they always do from a thematic standpoint and such is they always create a very interesting world, and they always take genres or take things from either different game, like video games or concepts, and reapply it into a board game scenario that you normally wouldn't think of. So as we mentioned with Exceed, if you watch our video on Exceed on the page, that one is a 2-player fighting game, basically in a card format, right? In playing cards formats, effectively. So that, and then in this situation and circumstance, it's a very different game than playing cards. Like, it's all about these bullet tokens that are going on this board and such. The other thing that, from a thematic standpoint and a development standpoint, that I think Bullet does really, really well too, is they always make very unique characters. And this game is no exception. As mentioned before, every player is going to be choosing these different characters, and every one of these characters is very distinctive in how they approach the game. And they actually have very different ways on how they clear bullets or how they operate in the game, where I think the example character that Ben was showing is this girl who's thematically a baseball gangster, Yakuza, so Japanese gangster. So which is an odd combination already in itself, but it's this concept of kind of being this like high hitting, like you're doing big, like you do high risk for high reward kind of plays, right? Where you're risking a lot to put yourself in a position, but once you're in that position, it really gives you the chance to like kind of knock it out of the park, like a home run kind of thing, right? That kind of concept. So that's that character. But then this character who's here, she's like the origami character. I think she has like a paper, like her artwork is something about like creating origami things. And basically her character actually has a token on the board of her site that moves around kind of like, I guess maybe like a flying origami of herself. And that allows her to manipulate bullets on the board or clear bullets out of her board entirely based on where that kind of little token is flying around in her space. So it kind of has that sense of like being this crane or being this object that she gets to manipulate to help her. And then there's a lot of other characters. I think there's 8 characters in total for Bullet Heart.
Mm-hmm.
All of them have their unique things. My personal favorite is this one with the music. She's a musical character. I think she's like super awesome. She does really well in games that I play. But they all have their different skills, their different styles and how they play. And that's another thing that I think is really strong in this game, is that feeling of when you're doing the clearing and when you're moving things around, you really feel like you're doing the stuff of that particular character. And it doesn't feel like I'm just a clone of somebody else's character, or like we're kind of the same, but it's just the artwork that differentiates us, which some games will do. I do feel like more and more these days they have been moving it away. So while I wouldn't call their gameplay asymmetrical in the sense as some people would, maybe mention, it's definitely very distinct player characters, let's say player powers and player characters, but the gameplay is not asymmetrical. Everyone is ultimately doing the same things of clearing and getting rid of the bullets and not trying to get hit. Just how you do that does differ between all the different characters.
Yeah, I would say like on the theme, it is one of the things that really caught me on the Kickstarter, where it's like, how do you translate that kind of video game, which I do know from like playing it even on like Super Nintendo growing up, those kinds of games. Like, how would you translate that into a board game? Like, and that's always kind of the thing that can still surprise me nowadays in the board game industry, of like, oh, the way they implement this theme or these just slight changes on mechanics do seem to be a way of translating a game into like a video game into a board game format. And so, but it was still kind of wondering then, like with my even now limited imagination, like how would they translate that? I was just thinking like, I might have told John too, like the only way I could imagine it was like, how do you make a bullet hell game into a board game? You take a bunch of bullets and like throw it at each other. It's like, that's all I can imagine. Like, is that the way the game's gonna play? But it's like, no, it's actually like a puzzle game, which then makes more sense, right? Of trying to like, when you play those games, like you're trying to be dexterous and like dodge the bullets, right? And not get hit, especially bullet hell games, which are like tons of bullets at a time filling the screen. But then you do get that kind of feel in this game where you're constantly needing to draw bullets to get through the level, basically. But then they, in a sense, represent everything that's being fired at you. And it's like, how do you survive that? It's a puzzle. Then you have to deal with them, clear them with your pattern cards, and move bullets around so that you lower your chance of getting hit by them. But then at the same time, I might have mentioned before in other videos, like real time as a mechanism does like stick out to me because I like that kind of intensity in a game. But then it also just fits in a game like this, right? It carries over a bit of that video game feel where like it's not just sit down, puzzle it out as long as you want to get what's best, using your resources the best way in a lot of games, that a lot of Euro games, as people might want to min-max those. But then it adds that time pressure of like an actual video game, like I gotta survive within this time because the level lasts this long. And so it's kind of like you're going through the level like in a video game that has a time limit. And so that theme wise really surprised me, and I like it.
And actually going into talking about the real-time aspect of this game, I actually think this game implements real-time in a good way, so if you play typical real-time games, what ends up happening in a real-time game is it's usually just whoever can act fastest is the one that tends to have the advantage. So for example, if you've played the real-time game Captain Sonar, what works well in that game is if you have a captain that's really fast and really good at quickly providing and creating and shooting out orders, generally speaking, your team will probably do a lot better than a team that doesn't kind of just move as fastly or make as quick a decision as, as the other player. So what can happen in certain real-time games is just literal speed in which you act in a game lets you win. In this game, though, it's actually the way that the real time works is it's more of like a time limit within the level or within the game. So I think it's what 3-minute timer per round when you play. And so basically what that 3-minute timer is doing is saying you have 3 minutes to fully go through that, fully make all of the decisions that you're going to make. Otherwise, if the 3 minute timer passes or the time runs out, what ends up happening is if you still have bullets in your bag that are incoming or that are coming at you that you need to place, you basically, when the timer's out, you just have to take bullets out and just place them on the board, and you're not allowed to use actions anymore at that point. So you're not allowed to use actions, you're not allowed to use your patterns to clear, you just have to do it, which I think is nice because while it still encourages, the faster you play, typically it'll allow you to fully utilize all of your resources. It doesn't necessarily punish somebody who maybe does take a little bit more time to think through their actions or what they want to do, and they can still kind of do it. And it allows fast players to keep playing really fast and they just do it, but it doesn't where I could see what they could have considered is you just play it kind of like spoons, where everything just is constantly moving, where if you're placing cards and you're shooting bullets over at the other players, it just keeps adding more and more bullets, and you just kind of become the funnel of there's just a bunch of bullets sitting on one player, and then the other players kind of sit around and wait, right? Which can happen in other kinds of real-time games. This game, it's like, no, you have your own setup, and that's why it's a puzzle game, right? Not necessarily like a just free-for-all crazy game, right? Where you do have to do your puzzle and you do know the amount of bullets that are coming at you. So you take care of that, you do that, and then it moves on. So then you kind of allow for players to really kind of both play at their own pace, but also encourage this, you can't sit around thinking about your turns forever.
And before, actually, I do have more to say on that too, now that you mentioned how that works. But before that, before getting more into the mechanics, I do want to say on the art, I love the art too, because I mean, John and I both grew up with anime. And I think level 99 using anime has always been cool. And then in their different games, I think a lot of the anime art, like the style to it is really nice, especially in this game, where even looking at some of the character boards, it just has this big character art on it, but I think they're all done so well. These 8 unique characters that are their original creations for this game. I think it looks so nice. And it's not just the style, there is a style to it, because I mean, I would obviously say I don't like all anime art, there's all different styles to it, but just the level of detail to these characters and their faces and their kind of proportions, and even the coloring, I think is really interesting. You can maybe see it more clearly in John's background, that some of the characters' coloring is very detailed, has really good shading and even blending of colors. I don't know the actual term to describe it, but it's not like that character's hair is just all blue and then with shadow, it has those tints of that orange or red in it, which then kind of become her kind of colors, that her color scheme. So I think all of that, the coloring and the actual anime style, is so nice for this game. And so, but yeah, with that, moving on to the pros with the mechanics, that I do want to say is that in addition to how you described the idea of the real time and avoiding the issue of a game like Spoons, where someone can become the funnel and kind of hold everything back or slow everything down, I think something that also is interesting about the theme is that it is primarily a competitive real-time game. Where coming into this review, I was actually trying to think briefly of what is a competitive real-time board game I know? And yes, you mentioned Captain Sonar, which I did not think of. So yeah, so
But
yes,
it's very few and far between still.
yeah, because a
right?
lot of
It's
the
not a
ones that we've even reviewed on this channel so far have been cooperative, right? Like Escape from the Curse of the Temple, and then also, wow, I'm blanking, but I totally just thought of it before
Wait,
this.
cooperative real-time game.
Yeah,
Escape from
co-op
the
real-time
Temple.
games like
Oh, like 5 minute dungeon.
yes, that's right. 5 minute
5 minute
dungeon,
mystery.
5 minute mystery, and then also was it
The escape games.
Mountains of
Mountains of
Madness.
Madness.
And so many of the ones that we've played and that we have are co-op real-time games, which makes sense, right? You don't want to necessarily make a real-time game where it's easy for someone to have an advantage over someone, because once you get into real time, you bring in maybe more of the dexterity element, right? Which is kind of what matters a lot in like sports, right? The better team is the one that is actually more skillful. But then for a board game, something lighter, it can make that experience really imbalanced for people, right? And so the way that they made it a puzzle but real time, I think really helps kind of balance it. And then also in bringing up Captain Sonar, it did bring to mind how in this game, the way I teach Bullet to people, like a lot of people recently, is I always make it real time because it is a real time game, but without the timer, which still captures a lot of that experience, right? Where then I would say the 3-minute timer per round is the full experience, but it's not like such a huge jump to get to that, right? Like if you've played just the regular game real time, just maybe once or twice, I would say then you can just jump into trying it with the timer, which does scare people still. But when you actually play with it, you'll start to feel like
3
the
minutes
first
is a
few
long
rounds.
time.
Yeah, 3 minutes is much longer than you think it is to do what you're doing. And then eventually it'll get harder. But then that is kind of the experience of like the video game is ramping up. So people are going to get defeated eventually. But yeah, that jump from real time to timed real time is not that big, where then I know Captain Sonar, the way they kind of in their own rules included a way to teach it, which isn't bad for that game. But I think in just kind of a general way, I like how Bullet is that, Captain Sonar, their basic way is to make the game turn-based, to teach people how everything works, have both teams take one turn, then the next turn, and so on, which I think would have been terrible for Bullet to turn the game into just turn-based, like you get to pull one bullet and place it, and now the next player gets to pull one bullet and place, like, oh my god,
slow.
That would take forever and like have no intensity to it. And so I really do like how the real time is implemented in this game. It just feels fitting, and it just, once you can get someone to just try the game as it is, it's not too hard to get to the full experience. And so that is kind of on the real-time stuff. But then there are other mechanics. I don't know if you want to also mention anything else on the pros side of the mechanics.
Yeah, so mechanics, the other cool thing that I think is nice is the separation between the actions bar or the actions tab that you have and the pattern clearing, right? So we mentioned that there's a pattern clearing deck where all characters have a unique amount of pattern or a unique pattern sets that they utilize for clearing the cards with different patterns on them. And as we said, every character is unique, so we're not going to talk about how those all work, but in effect, each of them have kind of things that are kind of thematic to their characters. One character has to do math in theirs to clear their bullets, so they have to be in a pattern, and then you have to do math based on the numbers on the card on the bullets that are in the pattern. Some characters, it's based on the colors that are in, the pattern set. So it has to be in a pattern, and it has to have a specific color or a specific number on it in order for you to clear it. And then some are just basic, where it's as long as it's within a very certain color or like a certain type of pattern, or it needs to be in a pattern and there needs to not be bullets in certain areas in order to clear, right? So there's lots of different ways of doing that. But I think it's nice where the clearing action does not cost action points to do, right? Because that could have been something that in a game, you make that an option, because it does seem kind of from a game intuition standpoint, it's like I need to spend actions to remove bullets is what you typically think of. But I like how in this game, it's more of the manipulation of the board itself is what actually causes actions, because it's kind of like, as Ben has said, in the shmup kind of style of games, when you played on video games, it's like moving your character around to move the bullets around, or at least not be hit by the bullets. So the same idea as in this game, where it's the actions that you're actually utilizing is moving around the bullets. And then by doing so, by the manipulation and the movement of the bullets, that is what then allows for the patterns, which would be you dodging the bullets or getting away from the bullets or being able to use a power that clears bullets in those shmup games like bombs and stuff like that, to then remove the bullets from your sight. So then they go over to the opponent in that way. So I actually really like that concept. And I also like that there are certain bullets that have stars on them, and every character, all of the characters, I believe, have an innate ability that when star bullets are cleared off of their board, they gain action points back. So it gives you an incentive of when you're clearing your patterns that you'll be able to do more things during your turn. So it's not like you only have 7 action points throughout the whole turn and then that's it. Right. You have the opportunity to kind of like chain multiple actions or find ways like those, chain multiple different ways of being able to get ready or set up to do more actions over the course of your turn, to be able to set up your patterns correctly or make sure you're just not hit by bullets or whatever you're going to be doing in the game.
Yeah, that small mechanic I was going to mention of the star bullets, which I was showing, right? There's a regular green bullet and then there's one with a star in the middle. And that's what John meant by a star bullet. And yeah, like I think adding that little bit too of just you get a bonus for clearing star bullets, that does help with the pattern and the planning, right? The strategizing of like, oh, do I actually want to take this chance and clear these set of bullets now? It'll maybe clear, but what if I get a star bullet later, right? Like, because if I clear it now, there's no star bullets. But if I can get a star bullet into the right position, then I can get a little bonus that helps me take other actions. Like that's a smart way to keep it going and not just be exactly what you're saying, a stale, I just have 7 action points to do. And then
I have to do the best I can with those only 7.
Yeah,
so nice.
And I think another small mechanic that I also really like, going back to the idea of how the real time works well, even without the 3-minute timer, is that I didn't mention this in the rules, but this is one of the small mechanics where if you're the first to finish in a round, there are power-up tiles in the middle that are randomly chosen at the start of each round. And they're basically one-time use actions or abilities. And so if you're the first to finish in a round, you get first choice of what's available there, and you'll add it to your actions sheet, your right side. And so then you can use it in any future round the one time to do something, which could be something like drawing a pattern card for free, because those power-ups cost 0 to use since they're just one-time use. You just use it and discard it. And so those can be helpful, definitely can be helpful, but I think it's a nice way to incentivize you, even if you're not playing with a timer, to do it faster, to finish your round faster than other players. And so that was a nice little touch too. And then I also think, I mean, you also touched upon this, but I want to emphasize the idea of the characters' like unique abilities and how different they play. It's just, I remember trying to tell you, I think even before we got to play the game, but just like reading the abilities after I understood how the game plays, kind of imagining how it could play and then reading the abilities to it, like each character's ability. And they just sounded so unique. So unique. And I think it's really a testament to this interesting system they set up of, you know, basically bullets and clearing them with patterns and dodging and surviving. And then layering on that all this kind of creative space for different characters that can interact with bullets differently, or interact with patterns differently, or have unique patterns, or have different kinds of abilities, or being able to move bullets differently than other players. And you know, it just really kind of gives level 99 games and the designers a space to really kind of come up with creative character abilities. And I think that's such a smart system that they've made to do that.
Yeah, I mean, like just even kind of moving into that one a little bit, one of the characters, for example, like they're kind of this like psychic character in effect, that they have the ability of like kind of moving things, right, manipulating things. So the way that they do their clearing, for example, is like their pattern cards typically don't clear straight off of their sight, But their thing is if they push it out of the sight of what they have in the board, it clears the bullets that way. So you basically kind of push things out. So it's kind of like if you think psychic powers, like how do you create that in a bullet hell game? Well, that's a great way. Like you're basically shoving your bullets out of the way. You're shoving them out of the space. So like you get that sense from the powers from the characters, which is not the same as pretty much every other character that you play as. So while you're still like, and that's why we said, while it's not technically asymmetrical in the sense of like, you're still clearing in the end, you're still moving bullets, but it's the how you do it is very distinct and very special to that character, where no other character is allowed to do that, right? Which is very unique. So.
And then I think for me, the last pro I can think of with the mechanics is I do like how the the clearing in the main mode of the game, the co-op, the competitive mode, is to be sent to your opponents, right? Because as a puzzle game, you also might immediately think like this will be like a Euro game, right? Basically, not really confrontational game because I'm doing puzzles, right? It's like if I just need to survive bullets, then it could have easily been the rules that as I clear bullets, it's just away from me, so I'm safe, and then we'll see who survives the longest, right? But no, like it captures that feel of later shmup games where you are actually trying to shoot at each other. And so I think that's a really cool idea, which adds a level of intensity that isn't from like the real-time aspect, but it's that my opponents every round are trying to make my next round harder, and I need to survive, but then also make their next round harder, And so I think that's a cool kind of dynamic and tension in the game of like, you are getting at each other, but it's also not as simple as an Amera Thrash game where you're literally, like in King of Tokyo, a monster beating on each other, but it's but it's still not a Euro game where you're just not interacting with each other. You are literally interacting each round through the bullets you're sending to the other person. So yeah, so those are my pros on the mechanics. But then the last pro section I want to get at is just the production. And so the version that I showed is the deluxe edition that I got from Kickstarter, and I think is maybe not the one in retail. Like you can't get it at game shops, I don't think, but you can still maybe get it directly from Level 99 Games, their website, perhaps. But the main difference in it is the tokens for the bullets, because in the retail version, they are standard like punch out cardboard flat tokens with the bullet color and number on them. But in the deluxe version, this big bag, the center bag I had mentioned where you draw from, it holds all the bullets, and they are these chunky white wooden tokens. And these feel great. And it's a whole, I don't want to spill it out. The whole bag is like 100, at least 100 of them, because that's how many bullets are in the whole game. But yeah, just like I would definitely recommend, if you like this game, to get the deluxe version, because being able to hold chunky bullets when you're pulling them out of your bag and like slide them on your sight versus maybe having issues, even grabbing onto a cardboard token in a bag and then having to move it around your sight, something that's flat, that can be rough, I think.
Yeah, and I was gonna say not just that, if it's cardboard, we haven't played with the cardboard retail version, but like I could imagine if you accidentally grab one too hard, or you grab it, like in the bag, or you're mixing and you squish your hand too quickly or too tightly, you could maybe even bend them, right? That would be kind of a not great thing. Versus these, right, being the wooden tokens, they're very firm. You're not breaking these anytime soon. Maybe the paint will chip eventually in time, but like at least for now, like we've played this however many times that you played, and none of the tokens have seemed to be chipping or losing their kind of like we're not losing sight of what these tokens actually are. Actually, component wise, one other thing I wanted to mention as a pro is this game is also colorblind friendly. We've mentioned this on a few other games. The patterns are technically colorblind friendly because on the tokens themselves, if you look at the bullet shape that it shows on each of the colors, the bullet shapes are actually unique, right? So you can see here between these two, there are very different looking. So in that way, when you're playing the game, you can actually distinguish between them. The only thing I'm not 100% sure about is if the patterns do the same thing, right? If the pattern shows the specific bullet color, or if it's the color that needs to be removed. I believe it actually shows the bullet type. So
yeah, it does show the actual like the
so
way
which
it looks on the
version
bullet.
you
Like the
need
reference card
and
does
whether it even
show
needs a number on it.
which
So that's
color's
really
bullet.
nice. So for colorblind people, this is colorblind friendly. So if you're watching this and you're colorblind, I hope that helps. Or if you know people who are colorblind that you play with, that is a positive incentive. I will say though, the red and the pink bullet shapes and even colors, ironically, are kind of similar. So that's these two are the only ones that I've actually had. I think in one of my games I played, I've accidentally put one of these in the wrong column. I put it in I think I put a red in the pink column because I assume, or I put a pink in the red column because I assumed it was the right color because the shape is generally the same. So I did miss that because I was not looking, because sometimes when you're kind of moving faster, like, but otherwise, as long as like you see the shapes, it is friendly for that. So that is something I wanted to note, which is a positive to the game.
And so going on to our cons of the game, this one, I mean, I don't have many cons, admittedly. So I don't know if I would break it down into cons with theme or mechanics and the sections we just talked about. But yeah, I mean, from you first, John, if you have cons, any points on this?
So I would say actually one con from a thematic standpoint of the shoot 'em up category, right? I would say the one thing that does feel a little bit funky about the game, just for being a shoot 'em up, is it doesn't necessarily feel like I'm actually playing a strict shoot 'em up, let's just say, right? So in technically in shoot 'em up games or shoot 'em up games, you do feel like your character directly is shooting at things that are coming at you, right? So in that sense of like, you have your little flying avatar usually of some kind, and then typically what happens in these games is there's ships or tanks or bosses and whatever coming into the screen and shooting all the bullets at you, and then you're dodging them while you're also shooting them back to blow them up. That part of the game, to the theme of this game, that's the one weakness I would say in the theme that feels a little weird. It's like, when I'm clearing the bullets, I don't necessarily feel like I'm like shooting down things, right? In that way. That's the only kind of like con I would say to the shoot 'em up categorization of this game. Obviously, you heard us talking about all the pros about everything about it, so I'm not going to go into detail about that because we already did. It's just more of this, it does feel not quite like I am necessarily directly shooting my opponent player per se. It even though like when I clear it does go over to them, so I kind of am. That's the only part where I'd say from that mechanic of like the competitive shooting and the feeling of a shoot 'em up style game, or like a shoot 'em up. If you play a lot of shoot 'em ups, that's the feeling that maybe isn't fully translated over, which maybe is just like again, I don't think it's a huge con because again, the implementation of this game is already great, but it doesn't 100% capture exactly a one-to-one transition of the theme.
Yeah, it's not like exactly what you would imagine. Exactly. Like you don't look at it and imagine like, oh, this is those kind of games. I would say, I mean, and I do agree with that con too. I would say I think maybe something that both of us are maybe lacking and also seeing the theme is we haven't played modern shmups where they are verses.
Yeah, that is
because I remember looking into that on Switch at the time, right? There was one game I came across called Maiden and Spell, an indie game, promoting indie game here, indie video game, where like that was the first time I think I really saw gameplay of like a shoot 'em up or bullet hell game where the two players are like characters shooting tons of bullets at each other, and you're literally like approaching it like a fighting game where you're dodging the bullets being fired at each other in this 2D space. And yeah, I mean bullet still doesn't translate that exactly either, but I think that is maybe more of what they're trying to draw from.
Yeah,
right.
yeah, exactly. And like as I said, like ultimately, it's not a huge con to it. I think, as we said, like it captures effectively in almost every other aspect, which is great, right? Because that's that, right? And then the only other con I would say, what is the other con? I had something in my brain. Actually, if you have stuff.
Yeah, I do
As
have one main con that comes to mind, which I don't think it's a big one either, but it is one to consider, where it's more, and it actually kind of applies to a lot of games, but it's the idea of like, when will you get tired of the main mechanics of the game, which is what John has mentioned a lot, the drawing the bullets and, them coming at you, you trying to survive and clear them. Like, when will you get tired of that? Because that'll affect your replayability of the game, right? Even as unique as the characters are, I know from playing it so many times now that each game does reach that point where it's like, I'm just out of pattern cards and I'm just getting tons of bullets, so I'm just gonna have to try to survive all these bullets coming at me. And that's with any character, so it's kind of like, will that end game, which is still just that main mechanic of the game going on indefinitely, this drawing bullets, trying to clear as many as you can and survive, like, when will you get bored of doing that? Like, will doing that a few times make any gameplay of the game just feel the same for you? Or will the unique characters, trying different ones and playing with the real-time timer, will that keep the game exciting for you? But yeah, there is that kind of sense of just the end game kind of always reaching that point too.
Actually, now that you raised that point, there is an interesting aspect of the end game of like how the end game tends to end up becoming, which really is just more of a last man standing, and just like, I just need to survive, versus maybe necessarily a feeling like I am going to shoot them up, or I'm gonna defeat my opponent per se. It's more like, I'm just gonna outlast my opponent, is almost the feeling that comes out of it. That is an interesting point, because then so kind of in that sense, maybe not a negative or a con to the game, but maybe something you should be aware of when you're getting it is, while we said this is competitive, this isn't strictly like, as Ben had mentioned, kind of that Ameritrash style of direct competition with your opponents per se, of like, I actively must end you like that. But it's more of the, I need to be the most efficient with my skills and abilities to survive to the next round, versus everyone else dying to the round, which, as I said, that's why it's more not a con, because that's actually more of like, that's what it means to be a puzzle game, right? In that sense of being this puzzle style. But if you're expecting more of like this direct competition or direct like action fighting against each other in that style, it's not this is a puzzle game, not a fighting game, or that kind. So just also be aware of that feeling, because if you come in with that expectation, you're probably going to be disappointed. So
I mean, and
you should go play BattleCon or Exceed if you want that feeling.
But also with what you're saying, it is true, that feeling of like needing to survive. But then if you do think about it, you made it harder for the other players to survive over the rounds, right? Like, it kind of built up that kind of difficulty for them. So there is that a way that you are still doing it, but not as directly as like, I'm hitting you now, and now
I'm like, I hit you for X, right? Or whatever. So, or I sent exactly this many bullets. Oh, actually, that was the other light con that I had, is the fact that you can only target the player to your left because of the way that the game plays, which I don't think there would be a good way of changing that right now, or maybe in future extensions they'll find a way to do it, because if you allowed for target selection, then everyone can target one character, that person gets screwed. So obviously, like, that's probably why they didn't add it. but it does feel a little bit frustrating in the middle of a game, or it could feel frustrating for you in the middle of a game where you just feel like the player on your right seems to always be able to send like 50 bullets at you, but then you're sending like 5 to the player to your left, and it's just like, okay, well, this guy's basically getting a safety because for some reason I just can't clear right a lot. And maybe it's how you're playing, maybe you're just not playing your character correctly, but there is a little bit of this like, I wish I could target somebody else for something, or I wish I could do something a little bit more in that affecting other players, because it does end up feeling more, I would say, closer to the Euro style of being puzzly, of while there is that, as Ben was mentioning, you are sending bullets over to other players, so you are directly affecting their, or you're affecting their boards in some capacity. It's just indirect. There's no other direct interaction with people in that way. So it's a very small con as well.
And it just kind of being aware, it is, I think it is fitting to technically call it a Euro game, but just when we say that here, don't think of like a resource management farming game.
True. But I don't think I have been like that. That's the only cons I could really think of. I think everything else is done really well. So
okay. Great. I don't have any other cons. I actually honestly still need to think of my rating. So I will ask John later to maybe say his first, and it'll maybe influence me slightly. But actually, before we get into that, I do want to just mention briefly that Bullet, or like we've been mentioning, talking about this version called Bullet Heart, they have level 99 games does already have a expansion, the first expansion to it in development, called Bullet Orange. So that's why we want to make sure we mention the heart in this case, because the expansion is called Bullet Orange. And let me just share the pre-order page for that. The pre-order came up months ago this year, but it's basically something that they got to do in conjunction with a video game company called Orange Juice, which has done various shmup video games over the years. And so in doing it in conjunction with them, Level 99 got to put those characters from those actual video game shmups into their Bullet game system. And so I think that's really cool and must be really exciting for them and the designer to be able to actually pair with a real life shmup and use those characters in this board game shmup. And so this is how it looks like. And it's going to basically be 4 characters that you add to the game as we've been talking about it, and those characters are the characters from those specific video games from Orange Juice. And so you have the games of like Flying Red Barrel, Suguri, Sora, and QP Shooting Dangerous. I guess that's what it's called. And so these are the characters, even more anime characters to add to this world. And something, if you didn't notice too, all the characters are girls in this game, which was I think a thematic or a stylistic choice they did, always keeping these characters as heroines. And so there is Bullet Orange coming out I think later, pretty soon. It ships in August, so I hope I get it soon. And then toward the end of this year, they had also announced the next expansion, which I believe will also be a standalone. So you can even just buy that one to jump into playing the full game of Bullet, which will be called Bullet Star. And so I think they'll be doing pre-orders for that later this year still. And so just want to mention those expansions in case you are interested in this base game already. And so getting on to our ratings, and John guesses the weight. Wait. So John, you want to give us your rating and then your guess of the weight to win a copy of this game?
So after careful consideration of all of the many different actions and thoughts that we had of this game my rating for this game, I've been going back and forth about this, so I decided
basically I need to hear yours, because I don't think you can give a higher rating than me.
I don't think I'm going to give a higher rating than you.
Okay.
So ultimately what I decided to give it, I think because I couldn't decide between the two, I'm going to give it an 8.25. is my rating.
Okay.
So I've been balancing between 8 and 8.5 is my thought process. I think it's so ultimately my thing is like, it's a really good game. You should really pick this up at some point if you can. It's a light game. Anyone can learn it. It's really fun. There's a lot of kind of, as long as you can count down some numbers and follow patterns and colors, you should be able to play this game, right? But I think there's just so many like opportunities and options for people to play, and it's very simple, right? As we mentioned again, like clearing things, utilizing the skills and abilities. It's very straightforward for pretty much most of the characters, maybe with exception to a couple like the math girl. You have to do a lot of math. That's a little bit harder to do on the fly. Math is hard, but I think it's very, very, very good in that. The problem, though, is I don't know if it's at the 8.5 level, given what we just talked about regarding endgame of the game, the long-term replayability of this kind of game on an ongoing basis and a regular basis. And then I think, actually, while we were talking about it as being a pro and fun and great in the anime style, kind of thinking back on that, people don't necessarily always turn to the anime style as something that they find enjoyable or interesting. And sometimes it can actually be a direct turnoff for a lot of people. So there is that possibility in the game as well. That specifically about the anime difference isn't what really drops it down. It is more of this other kind of replayability long-term and the end game conditions, as we kind of mentioned, of ultimately maybe kind of feeling like the same end condition every time you play the game of just like, there's just a crap ton of bullets coming at me and I'm just trying to like not be dead by the end of this round, right? That might kind of be tiring if you do that many, many, many times, even if you're doing all these different characters, because as you said, at the end of the day, one of the things about this game at the end of the day is it's the intensity just scales. So you never have a handle. And the ultimate aim is everyone but one person should be dead, or everyone dies, and then whoever did the best out of all who died wins the game, right? That's ultimately how you win the game. So that is something you have to keep in mind too. It's one of those like, I'm scrambling to stay on top of a sinking ship, and I'm the last person standing off of that sinking ship kind of feeling. So that can be fun, right? I think it is a fun thing to do multiple times. Just, I don't know if it's like 8.5 level of I'm always going to enjoy trying to do that. I'm always going to like that. If I'm going to give something an 8.5 or higher at that point, for me, it feels like I should always want to be getting to all the stages of a game, right? And so that's the thing I'm a little bit leery of in that regard. That being said, there is also, which we didn't mention, is the whole, cooperative component or solo play component.
Yeah, we did mention. Yeah, we mentioned that briefly.
We haven't actually. I don't think I've actually added that into the ratings of the game. The cooperative elements of this game is actually really awesome too. Maybe we'll talk about that in a future review, or like maybe if we do Bullet Orange, we can maybe go more into the cooperative aspect. But in effect, it's like then you're working together to do a battle against a pretty difficult AI in a very difficult situation, which is nice to do. And you're using your own board as well. So you can't have someone else is taking over your board to play for you. You literally are just playing your own board. So if someone is starting to do that, you just say, hey, stop it. Go play your own board. You got bullets to pull out of your bag. Go deal with it yourself. Right. So that's a nice part about it too. You do have this option of doing cooperative, and it scales with up to 4 players, which is nice. So you can have 4 people doing cooperative, like a cooperative style game.
And then the weight for the game.
Oh, yes. And then the weight. I'm going to guess my weight's been really off recently, but it's a pretty simple game, but it does have complexity. I'm going to say a 2.38.
2.38
for the weight.
So that's a medium light.
Medium light.
Or light medium. Yeah.
Light medium.
Okay. So before we look and verify John's guessing of the weight, the rating I gave the game, which I did not change ultimately from what John was saying, is 8.5.
That's
so
right.
I did do it. according to how I've been rating other games. And I had set that rating before, and I think I had already determined that based on other things that we've reviewed on this channel that I already gave a 9 to, which are usually going to be heavier games that have more going on. And I think like 8.5 I might have mentioned before is like the highest I would give to like a filler game, you know. And so I think it is just up there, you know. And what I was debating between was if I should give it 8.5 or 9. And I was like, is it really a 9? And so that's the point where for me what you were bringing up as what held it back being that end game feeling, that's what brought it back to 8.5 for me, because I do feel that feeling too, mentioned it during the cons, but I think what kind of keeps it from going below that is the kind of a saving grace of the co-op mode that I briefly mentioned, where having that is a nice switch up, you know, to kind of doing the same thing competitively, where it's like it's a co-op mode that actually works in the game, and it doesn't feel just tacked on of like, oh, okay, now you just send bullets to this one thing, but that one thing, the boss actually is very special, and each one has its own challenges, you know, so it does feel thought out more and not tacked on. And so that's kind of what keeps it from dropping lower. And then but then everything else that I've mentioned in the pros, I love the system they set up, which is just so simple an idea, but then they can be so creative about the other things around it. And then I actually do personally really enjoy the anime art in this game and how it's done and the coloring, and even just the production too. So, and then just I guess with that is how many people I've taught the game to just within this year of finally getting to play it. It's like, yeah, it does have that feel of like, quite a bit going on, but still a light game. And so it is still teachable to so many people. And it's just refreshing, this real-time puzzle kind of feel compared to a lot of other more gateway games I've taught, which, you know, there's really good ones, but then, you know, they are in a sense more clearly Euro or more clearly Ameritrash attacking each other, or kind of resource management, where this is like just very different feeling. And so it was really refreshing for me to come across it. And so 8.5 from me, 8.25 from John, and then let us go to Board Game Geek to see John's. What did you say? 2.3.
Did I get it? Did I get a free?
What did you say? 2.3.
2.38.
2.38. And so on Board Game Geek, the weight is
free game. Free. Oh no, not even close. Not even close.
1.95. Even lighter. Even lighter.
Even lighter. That feels like so light though. No.
2.3 is pretty getting close to medium though.
I know. I need to refresh my weight complexity thought process.
I was like, when you said 2, I was thinking like, yeah, just stay at like 2.0 something, but you said 2.3. I'm like, ooh.
Yeah, I gotta reset myself on what is considered complicated and not complicated.
And then of course the average rating from the community right now is 7.9, but you can see that there's only like 700 ratings, which is decent, but to me it is a sign that a lot of people still haven't tried it, which is unfortunate because Level 99 is a decently known name in the industry. And I think I do think maybe along with what John had mentioned, that what could be holding it back is the anime style to it that doesn't appeal to a lot of people, which is also unfortunate because we grew up with that. And so we don't have a problem with it. And so
if any of you like Naruto or Dragon Ball Z or Pokemon, those are all anime.
So yeah, I would definitely encourage you guys to check this out if you can, to try it if you know someone who has it. Just a very different, refreshing, really pretty anime style looking puzzle real-time shmup board games. Throwing all the words together. And so, yeah, that is our review of Bullet Heart. And so if you guys found this interesting, helpful. I hope you'll share this with friends, family, people you play board games with. Hope you'll consider subscribing to this channel and following us on Instagram at I Got Board Game. Until next time, we'll see you then. Bye.
Hey.